So Canada Post is trying to make some changes to how they're doing their services, or they're talking about it anyway. They haven't done it. One of their solutions is to start closing rural post offices. As someone who lives rurally, I'm like pretty against this move. But I'm against this move for maybe reasons that you may not expect. My biggest fear is that if they start closing local post offices, they're not going to allow the locals to decide where their zones are. Like some policymaker in Ottawa is going to decide that. And what happens is when policymakers decide, make these kinds of decisions, is these kind of decisions are very like arbitrary and like silly. A really good example is like my health zone. So for example, when I call the provincial government to get put on the provincial waiting list for a family doctor, they're like, yeah, your zone is in the city an hour away, not the clinic 30 minutes away that just hired a whole bunch of brand new doctors. So you have to wait for a family doctor in the city. I ended up skirting around the system anyway by just ignoring what the provincial government was telling me, and it's fine, but that's not going to be able to happen with Canada Post. So what they're going to do is they're going to close the post offices, but they're going to take away locals' autonomy to like make decisions about, maybe where your new zone is. So here's something that I propose. If Canada Post is going to move forward with deciding to close all of these rural post offices, because I live kind of like in between two post offices and I'm kind of like 10 minutes away from either one of them. So I personally would be okay if one of them were to close. However, I know what's going to happen if one of them closes, and they're not going to assign me to the one that's 10 minutes down the highway. They're going to assign me to the one that's in the city over an hour away. So if we're going to continually have services taken away from like rural people, whether it be the closure of hospitals or the closure of clinics or, the closure of like labs, like to get your blood like tested or taken or whatever, right? Because they're doing a lot of that too. If you're going to continually to take these services away from rural people, then allow rural municipal governments and rural people themselves to make decisions about where we get to place these new services then. Because if you're going to continually to just take things away from us, then at least allow us to like make our new zones, right? With healthcare, for example, rather than having these silly provincial laws, my zone would just be like my clinic 30 minutes away. And I would like to see the same with Canada Post too. So if you have to move forward with continuing to take services away from rural people, at least put the power back into rural communities and allow rural governments and mayors to make these decisions.